Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Dan Reed with Score Maine. If you're not familiar, Score Maine is a small business resource partner of the Small Business Administration, where we provide one-on-one small business networking or small business mentorship and small business training, just like this one. I also want to say a huge thank you to the Maine Technology Institute, who is a sponsor of our workshop today and a sponsor of many Score workshops. They're a wonderful resource in the state of Maine, and we're going to hear a little bit more about them from Tom, who I'll pass it over to.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Good to see a lot of folks on the call. My name is Tom Kittredge. I am with the Maine Technology Institute, which I'm about to share a little bit about. Thank you, Ed, for having me. I've been doing these workshops for, I think, probably around 3 years now, and we always have some great dialogue, lots of questions at the end. So I'm looking forward to that. My presentation typically takes around 20 to 30 minutes, so there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Feel free to toss some in the chat. Or raise your hand and I'll answer as we go. All right, let me just get my slideshow on. Is that showing up okay? Yes, seeing
Yeah, we're
that. Great.
seeing.
So just to start with a little bit of a high-level overview of Maine Technology Institute, or I'm going to say MTI going forward. So we are a nonprofit. We're primarily funded through the state of Maine, but we're not technically a state of Maine agency. And our mission is really to support innovation in Maine with the underlying goal of creating economic development in the state. So the hope really is that by giving resources to entrepreneurs and to businesses in Maine who are engaged in innovation, that will allow them to grow those businesses and then create economic impact here in Maine. So just a little bit about the history of MTI, just to kind of set the stage. So we were founded in the late 90s, 1999. And at the time, Maine was lagging behind pretty much the entire rest of the country in terms of investing in research and development and investing in innovation. And the legislature and the governor at the time felt that for Maine to enter the 21st century and be successful, that we really needed to invest in R&D and emerging sectors and support heritage sectors continuing to kind of evolve. So that's why MTI was created along with our sister organization, the Maine Venture Fund. And then as you can see, 2005, 2011, and then this year, we've gradually grown. As of this year, we just released our annual report. We had supported 4,350 projects in Maine and put out over $387 million in funding, which has gone to countless Maine-based organizations and led to tremendous economic impact. So this slide really just gets at the idea that MTI works with businesses at a variety of different stages. So we work with very early stage businesses, so right past ideation. So, people have an idea and hopefully have done some work to validate that idea, but, very early stage, pre-prototype, pre-minimum viable product, all the way to businesses that have been in the market for decades, are generating millions of dollars in revenue, but perhaps have a new innovation or a new project or product they're rolling out. So just again, this really just gets at the idea that we work with a large variety of companies in terms of scale and stage. So I'm going to talk about a number of programs today, but the core one is this one in purple here, the Business Innovation Funding, which is really at the heart of what we offer. And that's a program that gives out grants, loans, and equity funding to support the development and growth of new products, devices, or methods. So basically, this is what we use to put money to businesses that are engaged in innovation are looking to grow and scale here in Maine. Just briefly, some of the other resources we have. So this second one, the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps, that's somewhat similar to the Business Innovation Funding Program, but specifically it's intended to help businesses hire Maine-based consultants. So we maintain a network of consultants here in the state of Maine. Any consultant based in Maine could apply to be part of that network. And then businesses who have a short-term consulting need can apply for support hiring those consultants. So we provide up to half of the funding for that consulting engagement, up to $20,000. So this can be a really good resource if you're looking to bring on board a consultant to do anything from marketing and sales assistance to software development to developing your HR manual to filing for a patent. This is a really great resource for that. But again, it's only funding specifically for consulting, and ideally it would be a Maine-based consultant. Event sponsorship, that's funding that we put out for affiliated organizations who are doing events that celebrate, champion, educate Maine's innovation economy. So think of Startup Maine, SCORE would be a great example, Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, Dirigo Labs. There's lots of organizations that hold events focused on entrepreneurship in Maine, and so we want to support those. Our federal funding technical assistance program, we call it the TAP program. That's to help businesses who are looking to apply for federal grant funding. So a number of federal agencies administer grants focused on their specific purview. So for example, the Department of Energy might have grant funding available for companies who are doing interesting things in the clean energy space. And so what this program that MTI offers does is it basically helps you write compelling grant requests to those federal agencies. So we don't actually put out money through this program, but we do offer some pro bono support from very experienced consultants, essentially, who can help you put forth a compelling, well, first can help you figure out whether or not you're likely to be a fit for any of these grants. And then if you are a fit, help you write compelling grant requests. The next one, entrepreneur support organization funding. So that is funding we put out once a year for other ecosystem organizations, again, entities like SCORE, who are supporting Maine's entrepreneurial community. So not necessarily for-profit businesses, but more nonprofits that are running important programming in the state of Maine, and we want to support those. So that's what the entrepreneur support organization funding is. And then occasionally we'll run some other one-off programs. For example, we just closed the Maine Technology Asset Fund, which is a program administering $25 million from the state of Maine, the R&D bond that was passed by voters back in November 2024. So we'll run those. Basically, we sometimes have one-off programs. That was one of them, but that one's currently closed. But yeah, so from here, I'm going to mostly talk about the Business Innovation Funding Program, which again is really the heart of what we offer. So at a high level, and I already kind of read this out, so business innovation funding, again, is really intended for businesses who have a clear innovation, and I'm going to talk about what we mean when we say innovation in a moment, and are looking to scale that innovation and create economic development in Maine. And again, the funding can be grants. We also do loans and equity investments. So the key requirements for the Business Innovation Funding Program, so in terms of what we call internally fit to MTI, economic impact potential. So again, that's businesses that are looking to scale here in the state of Maine, create jobs, grow revenues, and have other forms of economic impact here in the state. Innovative and forward thinking. So again, you have to have a clear case that you are doing something that is innovative within your sector and that innovation gives you some sort of competitive advantage. Maine-based. So you have to demonstrate that you are predominantly based here in the state of Maine. 7 targeted technology sectors, and I'm going to go into what each of those are. And then you have to have access to matching funds. So I'm going to go through each of these in more depth, but that's just at a high level. These are really the 5 essential components to be a fit to MTI. So again, economic impact potential. So that's really, again, that's our end goal. So we support innovation, but again, the end goal of innovation is to get to economic impact. So we're really looking to see businesses that are aspiring to scale. So sometimes we have people come to us who have a one-person operation and they're quite content, just being a one-person operation, and they aren't trying to grow their business beyond that. They might have a great innovation, they might meet all the other criteria, but they probably wouldn't be a fit for MTI funding simply because they're not looking to scale here in the state of Maine. And really, MTI funding is intended to help create that scaling economic impact. So that's really the first key component. And again, creation and retention of quality jobs is probably the most important metric to us. It's definitely something that we look at when we're evaluating an application, but we do look at other things as well. Growth and acceleration of revenues, attraction and leveraging outside capital, and then all the other forms of economic impact a business can have in terms of a Maine-based supply chain or Maine-based customers, or bringing in a technology that's going to help the industry overall. So we take a very holistic look at economic impact, with job creation really being kind of the core of it. Maine-based organizations. So one is you have to be a registered Maine business, and that's quite simple to do. You just go on the Secretary of State for Maine's Bureau of Corporations website and submit a registration form. I think it's like $100 or something like that. That's a requirement to get funding from MTI. It's not meaning you're incorporated in Maine. So, for example, we work with a lot of companies that are incorporated in Delaware because that's a very common place to incorporate for corporations. But you have to be registered to do business in Maine, and then predominantly based in Maine. So, in today's age of remote work and distributed workforces, MTI recognizes that lots of times Maine-based companies have employees in other parts of the world and other parts of the country, which is okay. But ultimately, we're looking to support companies that are predominantly based in Maine. So, things we look at to make that assessment are where are the key decision makers based? So, the C-suite, the founders, are there physical headquarters in Maine? How many employees are in Maine to elsewhere in the world? So we look at all those things to kind of make that assessment as to whether or not a business is predominantly based in Maine. And then here at the bottom, the or means that occasionally we do have applications from companies who are outside of Maine, but are looking to move to Maine. And so we'll entertain those applications and even potentially get a funding decision to those companies, but we won't actually be able to put money out the door until the business can demonstrate it has relocated to Maine. Innovation. So along with economic impact, innovation, this is really kind of the core of what MTI is looking to see. Unfortunately, it can be a little difficult to define. I think a lot of businesses think what they're doing is innovative, and probably in some ways they are. So, the first thing I'll say about innovation is it is contextual. It's very much based in kind of the space you operate in as a business. So different sectors and different, micro sectors within those sectors, innovation might mean something different. But really what we're looking to see is that you're doing something that is meaningfully differentiated from existing alternatives in the market. So essentially meaningfully differentiated from your competition, and that differentiation gives you some sort of competitive advantage in the marketplace. So you basically need to be able to demonstrate to MTI, listen, I'm doing business a different way, or I am creating a product or a service that's different and better than what's out there. And that gives me an opportunity to get more customers, to sell my product cheaper, what have you, and ultimately grow the business. So you really have to be able to create that linkage between what you're doing that's innovative and how it's going to allow you to grow as a business. And some of the ways you can kind of prove that innovation, customer discovery. So going out and speaking with potential customers and getting their feedback on your idea, your innovation, and documenting that in a way you can include in an MTI application. Market research, so being able to speak to the size of the market opportunity, what trends are in the market. Review of existing IP, so IP stands for intellectual property. So being able to understand, are there any patents out there that are blocking what you're looking to do, for example. And then competitive landscape analysis, which is basically being able to look at the competition, identify who they are, talk about what they're offering, and then talk about how you're offering something that's better or differentiated in a way that's going to get you more customers. And I will say all four of these things are things that SCORE and SCORE mentors can be really helpful doing. We've had a number of companies apply for MTI funding who have utilized SCORE to help with these activities. So I definitely recommend that is one way you can take advantage of a SCORE mentor if you have one. So these are the 7 targeted technology sectors that MTI works within. These were laid out back when we were created in the late 90s because the government at the time, the legislature and the governor perceived them as being crucial to Maine's future economic success and growth. People can read them here, so I won't go through them all. What I do want to emphasize, though, is that we try to be relatively flexible when it comes to assessing whether or not a business is within one of these sectors. We look at both, is the business within the sector or potentially is the innovation within the sector. So specifically with like IT, we'll have companies come to us where the company itself probably doesn't qualify as being in one of these sectors, but they have a very innovative platform. And because that's an IT product, we're able to kind of have them apply within information technology, even though the business itself is not within one of these sectors. But again, you still have to demonstrate the innovation component of it. So you can't, purchasing access to Salesforce for your company is not enough to qualify as IT. You have to demonstrate that there's an innovation. But if there is an innovation, and it falls in one of these sectors, it's okay that your business itself is not in one of those sectors. And then lastly, access to matching funds, which is also actually something laid out in our statute. So this is a requirement that we need to have matching funds for any MTI award. So the best way to think about matching funds is cost share on the project. So MTI, we fund projects that help move your innovation forward. And basically what you need to be able to demonstrate is that you're going to pay for at least half of the project you're proposing to us. So if you come to us and say, hey, I have a $50,000 project in mind that's going to help me advance my innovation, MTI could potentially put in up to half of the funding for that, so $25,000. And the expectation would be that you are going to pay for the other half of that. Now, we're fairly flexible as to how you pay for that. So that can be from your own personal funds. If the business is generating revenues already, it can be from revenues. It can be that you got outside investors, friends and family, a bank loan, your credit cards. But you basically have to demonstrate that you're going to be able to pay for at least half of the project that you're proposing to MTI. This part here down in italics, the sweat equity piece. So for early stage companies, so those tend to be companies requesting a smaller amount of funding from us, typically under $30,000. We're able to accept a portion of the match in what's called sweat equity, which is essentially the value of the founder's unpaid labor that they're putting towards the project. So if you're proposing a project to MTI and you're going to be putting in 100 hours on the work that's being done in the project and you're not being compensated for that, we can say, well, if you were to actually hire somebody to do this work, you'd probably pay them X amount of money. So we'll basically count that as cash match. We have a limit on kind of how high you can value your match, which is $50 per hour is the rate. So even if you would probably be paying somebody $100 an hour to do the work, unfortunately, we can only accept it up to $50 an hour. But it is a nice way to offset some of the cash match requirement for an early stage project. I will say that you still have to bring some cash match, so anywhere from 50 to 70%. And when you potentially speak to somebody at MTI, we can kind of run you down what that looks like. But it is a way to offset some of the cash match requirement if you were to apply for MTI for funding. So this just gets at the idea that the amount of MTI funding that you are eligible for, assuming you're a fit to that kind of the broader fit question. So you're a Maine-based business, who has an innovation and is looking to grow, and there's a sector fit, and all of those kind of key high-level requirements are met. Then the next question becomes, okay, so you're a fit to MTI broadly. What sort of project and how much funding might we be able to put out the door? And this is kind of where these 6 categories come in, which are the key criteria that we look at when assessing whether a company is a fit for MTI and how much funding they're eligible for. So this is taken from our rubric that we use to judge applications. These are the 6 areas we score an application on. So economic impact potential, which is, again, just what's your potential to grow here as a business in Maine and what sort of economic impact could you realistically create? Team, which is really that idea of, and I'm going to go into all of these in a little more depth in a moment as well, but team is really, who's involved in the project that you're proposing to MTI and also the business overall, and how are those people equipped to achieve the project and grow the business. So that's both like founders, that's other employees, but it can also be mentors, a board of advisors, if you're hiring contractor consultants, anybody really involved in bringing the project to fruition. That's what we mean when we say team. I've already touched on innovation and value proposition, but again, that's really why, what are you doing? Why is it innovative? What problem are you solving? What sort of validation do you have that what you're doing is actually innovative? Customer and market. So who's your target customer? What's the market opportunity? Business and organization model is really, how do you make money? What's your sales model? How do you become a profitable business? What sort of expenses do you have? Will you need to raise any outside capital? And just really making a credible case that you're positioned to become a profitable business if you're not already. And then scope of work and budget, that's what we use to describe the project. So that's what we assess when we're kind of assessing how much funding a business is eligible for. And you can see there's kind of different levels of MTI funding. So we put up to $100,000 in grant funding out for businesses. And again, that's grant funding. And then beyond that, any sort of funding that MTI would put out the door would be either a loan or an equity investment. So if a business is raising an equity round, we might be able to participate in that. Or if they're seeking loan funding, we might be able to support. It's something I really want, a few things to emphasize here. One is, so there is a cumulative pool of $100,000 of grant funding available per business that's a fit to MTI that they can tap into. It's very rare for us to put out all $100,000 at once. What's much more common is for us to put out a smaller amount, let's say $30,000 for a business to execute on a project. Hopefully they'll be successful in their project, and then they'll have an opportunity to come back to MTI and apply for follow-on funding. So the intent of MTI funding is really to kind of build upon itself. So you do a project, you hopefully succeed in the project, it helps you grow the innovation, and then you come back for follow-on funding. So that's just one area to emphasize. And the other is, we're more flexible the less money you're asking for. So one thing that happens is sometimes a business is eligible for up to 30,000 because we're willing to take a higher risk with them, and we might have some questions about their business model or about the business or about their economic impact. But because they're coming in at a lower amount of funding, we're like, you know what, we'll take a risk. And then they come back to MTI and they're not able to demonstrate that they've scaled up to the point where we feel comfortable putting more money out the door. So that's kind of where they cap out until they continue growing as a business. So it's just our expectations and standards get higher the more funding you're requesting. So that's the other thing to kind of emphasize from this slide. Okay. So in terms of the process, in terms of how to go about, if you're interested in MTI funding, the first is we have a self-assessment that's on our website. And I would encourage everybody to take that. It's a very handy tool to figure out whether or not you're a good fit for us. It takes everything I've said so far, but it goes into a little more depth. Something to emphasize about the self-assessment is it's just for you. It's not going to, your results aren't going to go back to us and penalize whether or not you're able to get MTI funding. It's really just a way for you to get a good sense of whether or not you're a fit for us. Assuming you are a fit, or even if you don't seem like a fit, but you still have questions, there's an option to submit an interest form, which basically creates a record in our database that you want to talk to us. And then myself or one of my colleagues would send you an email and say, hey, let's hop on a call and, set up a time to speak with you. Meet with an MTI representative. So these days that's virtually. So would either set up a phone call with you or set up a video call with you to talk through your business, to talk through what sort of project you had in mind, and help you figure out whether or not you're likely to be a good fit for MTI support. Assuming you are a good fit, then you'd submit a funding request with a few different documents and would provide you with the templates for all of these. You don't have to do them from scratch. So the scope of work and budget, that's really the project. So scope of work is you saying, here are the project activities, here are the deliverables. So we ask you to identify a project that has a clear timeline and very specific deliverables linked to it. Within that project, you could have one key activity or you could have multiple key activities. So by activities, I mean one activity might be product development and another activity might be sales and marketing campaign. So that's a very high level. And then within each of those high level activities, you'd put specific deliverables. So you'd say, here are exactly the product features that I'm looking to develop over the course of this project, or here's how many customers I'm trying to reach, or, here is the market research I want conducted, or what have you. So we ask you to be fairly specific and quantify what you're looking to achieve with the project and a rough estimate of how long it's going to take for each of those activities. The budget form is an Excel document, and that just asks you to identify what are the expenses that are associated with the project, how much are you asking for from MTI, and then how much are you bringing in matching funds? So how much cash match are you bringing, and then how much sweat equity are you proposing? And then lastly, an application form that has a 5 categories: economic impact, team, innovation, market, and business model, which I touched on. And then, specific sub questions within each of those categories. And then wait while your application is in review. Typically that takes around 2 months. You are welcome to get started on the project while your application is in review. So MTI doesn't want to make you wait if you have a project that you really need to get done. So you can start spending your matching funds while you're waiting to get a result from us. And then hopefully if your application is approved, then you could take the funds you get to continue the project. And then if your application is approved, there are ongoing reporting requirements. Typically for a grant, that just means you have to submit a final report at the end of the project. If you're going after loan or equity funding, we ask you to report once a quarter on the state of the business, just so we can kind of keep track of our portfolio. So when's a good time to contact MTI? So when's a good time to submit an interest form request to speak with one of us? These are kind of the high level things you should be prepared to speak to. So the problem you are addressing, ultimately, why does your business exist? Why does your innovation exist? What solution are you providing to your customers that they need? And point to supporting evidence. And this is really true of all of the below, which is anytime you're submitting an application to MTI, we want you to be able to validate and point to supporting evidence for the claims you're making. And again, that evidence can be as simple as, some customer interviews where you spoke with 15 customers and interviewed them and got some research, or again, a market study or what have you. But just having supporting evidence is very helpful. Your innovation and how it's differentiated from existing options. Again, customer discovery. So have you talked to prospective customers and what sort of feedback have you got from them? Team with complementary skill sets, so being able to provide the resumes and CVs of your team members and show that they together you have the cumulative skills needed to fulfill the project. Competitive landscape and market opportunity, so who's your competition, and again, what's the market opportunity? And then lastly, what resources will you need to move the innovation forward? So what sort of money do you need? What other resources do you need to actually move this innovation forward and grow your business? So this is just a little bit on the self-assessment. This is just a snapshot of what it looks like on our website. So if you go on there, there's this link. You can click that to take the assessment. It's going to bring you through a number of these different questions. A lot of the things I just touched on, but it's a way for you to assess whether or not you're really ready to talk to MTI. And then based on your answers, you'll get an opportunity to kind of get some specific feedback from us, and also suggestions as to where maybe you can improve if there are areas you're not strong. So for example, in this case, before I selected no for can you clearly define your target market size and customer segments? So you get this feedback and would point you towards some resources that might be helpful to build out in that area. So that's all I have for now. I'm happy to take any questions folks might have.
Yeah, Tom, I got one here.
Yeah, go ahead. Is that Nick? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So my question was, so like the program, oh, actually, I guess it'd be more for because I guess you're part of the MTI. I guess it's for the score. I don't know if you work
Yeah, I can
with,
answer that question.
yeah. So like the programs that you guys offer, obviously, like you guys do the business innovation funding. That's like the main one you guys are talking about. But like say if my business was declined for that main one, would I be able to utilize like the Entrepreneurial Resource Corporation or the federal funding assistance to help me like further try to get funding somewhere else?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so all those programs are assessed differently. And so yes, just because you're declined for one MTI program, well, a couple things. One is yes, because you're declined for one MTI program does not mean that you would be ineligible for another program. And also, I've had a number of cases in my 6 years at MTI where a company hasn't been quite ready for MTI funding yet, but 6 months later, a year later, they are a fit because they've made certain key steps, and then they're able to come back and reapply for funding. So our funding decisions aren't permanent. There's always the option to come back once you've kind of addressed the areas of concern.
I see.
But
Yeah.
but yes, if you're not a fit for a business innovation funding program, you may be a fit to get assistance on applying for federal funding, for example, or you may be a fit for the main Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program. I will say that specific program does have a lot of overlap in the criteria for business innovation funding. So typically, if you're not eligible for business innovation funding, you're probably not eligible for MERC because you also have to demonstrate innovation and economic impact potential. But there is some flexibility. So there is always the chance that you might be eligible for one, but not the other.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Go ahead, Denise.
So my biggest worry when it comes to being able to qualify for your funding and looking into the other options as well is fitting within the 7 sectors. Um, so if we don't fit in the 7 sectors for the innovation funding, is it possible we could fit in something else, or the 7 sectors follow everything with MTI?
That's a great question. So for federal funding, no, definitely not. I mean, if you go on, if you Google or go on our website, but if you Google SBIR, STTR, there are, I think it's 17 different federal agencies administering funding through that program, and they range from everywhere from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Defense to the Department of Energy to the Department of Transportation. So um, they have a much broader array of sectors that they support. So for federal funding, uh, definitely not. For the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program, there is some overlap, but they tend to be more flexible than the Business Innovation Funding program. So if you think there might potentially be a fit, I would definitely encourage you to just reach out and set up a call with somebody at MTI. And again, as I mentioned, the business itself doesn't necessarily have to be in one of those sectors if you can show that the innovation that you have is within one of those sectors. So that's the other kind of piece of context to add.
Thank you. One other question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Does the federal that you are referring to, is that the same as like the SAM.gov, or is that different?
I believe it's different. I'm actually not that familiar with SAM.gov, but yeah, just to provide a little more context on SBIR, STTR. So those are funds that are administered by those 17 federal agencies for research and development, specifically for companies who are doing something innovative in their spaces and are looking to grow. But it's really research and development focused. So it's looking for kind of higher risk projects that might fail, but that have the potential to do something really interesting. So that's that funding program.
Thank
I
you.
got one more, Tom, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So I was a little confused with between the grants that MTI can give out versus the equity funding.
Yeah, so they're all part of the same. That's a great question, and I need to add a slide on that because it's something I always glide over in these. So the grants, loan, and equity funding are all part of the same program, and they all have very similar criteria. They're all part of the Business Innovation Funding program. The reason that MTI offers loans and equity funding is because we have that $100,000 cumulative grant cap limit, but we want to be able to support companies as they continue to grow, even if they've maxed out their grants with MTI. So we offer loans and equity investments as a way to hopefully get a return on those, and then we can take that money and put it back into new companies. So when it comes to equity, what we're looking to see is you have to meet all of the criteria for business innovation funding. And then also you have to be in the process of raising a fundraising round. So going out and seeking investors. MTI won't be the lead investor. If you're looking to raise investment, you'd have to find somebody else to be the lead investor. And then MTI could potentially come along and be a supporting investor. So if you say, hey, I'm raising a $1 million fundraising round. I have 4 investors already identified, and they're going to put in 600,000. MTI, will you give me another 100,000? We might be able to consider that, but you'd have to meet all the business innovation funding criteria, and you'd have to kind of make a case that you have a compelling investment that our team would be interested in participating in.
No, I got that. I was just confused. Yeah, it makes sense because that makes sense. I didn't realize the difference, but now that I realize like the grant would be the one I'd be going for first because I'm more in the development
Yeah,
commercialization stage of it.
and that's another good point, which is almost always the first sort of funding you'd get from MTI would be a grant. We very rarely go straight to loan or equity. It's great. I mean, businesses typically want grant funding first because there's no expectation of repayment and they're not giving up any of their equity. And then, it's good for MTI because it's a way for us to build a relationship with the company before we put out a loan or an equity investment.
All right. Do we have any other questions today?
Yeah, this is Dan Peabody. I have a quick question. And you might have touched on it already, Tom. Say we've applied for a SBIR grant, which would be our matching funds. Um, Timing wise, can we get approval from MTI for a grant while that application is pending, or how do we work the timing of those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, SBIR. So one thing to note about MTI funding is that it can't be it can't be used to match state of Maine funding, but it can be used to match federal funding. So SBIR, STTR funds, if you are given an award, you could use that to match an MTI request. Or you could put in an MTI request while your SBIR, STTR application is under review and run a project. So they're not exclusive in any way. So you can definitely apply for MTI funding while you're waiting to get a result on your SBIR, STTR application. And then potentially, if you want, use that as match, but you wouldn't have to use it as match for the MTI request.
So, Tom, just to clarify, I could use the MTI funding to cost share federal-based programs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the project would have to align with the project you're applying for on a federal level would have to align with the sorts of projects that MTI supports. But if you were proposing an MTI project that was aligned with what you were going after federal funding to do, you could use MTI funding and federal funding, and the federal funding could be your match to the MTI request.
Okay.
And then in terms of whether or not the federal funds would allow the MTI funds to be a match, that's dependent on the program that you're going after. And so.
Got it. Steve Aaron here. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
In terms of funding, say Maine-based institutions like the University of Maine, are there any restrictions with using any of the money to help fund any activities at a Maine-based institution?
Do you mean if you're a business who wants to utilize some of those resources, or do you mean if you're one of those institutions applying for funding?
Good question. I'm a business that wants to utilize some of those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've had companies that have taken advantage of like the Advanced Manufacturing Center at UMaine or the Searle Lab at USM. So you could use those funds to go to pay for services at a university or an institution. Again, as long as the project is generally a fit to MTI.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
I do have a question. John Charlebois here. I just like switched over to do a quick, to quickly check out if I were able to be in one of the seven criteria. And it looks like, as been the case my whole career, I'm kind of in a gray area, and how can I start maybe a dialogue with someone that can parse out whether my particular service approach and innovation can fit the criteria without being so technologically based?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great
I'm
question.
in medicine, but I'm not in bioengineering or biotechnology.
Yeah, great question. A few thoughts. One is, again, we're fairly inclusive when it comes to the sector definitions, as long as you can demonstrate innovation and the fact that your business is positioned to scale. So you don't specifically have to be in bioengineering to qualify for biotech, but you have to demonstrate that you have something that's really innovative and it's going to allow you to grow as a business. So that's the first thing. The second is, if you think you're in any of the gray zones for any of these, definitely feel free to just submit an interest form and talk to somebody at MTI.
Okay.
So I mentioned that we have, that self-assessment. I would definitely recommend doing that. But if you aren't sure on some of the questions, or you're like, maybe, just submit an interest form. And again, that's kind of the key word you're looking for, is submit an interest form or interest form. And that all that does is it says, hey, I'm interested in your program. I think I might be a fit, but I'm not sure. Or you think you are a fit and you are sure. But basically that just initiates the process. And the first step is a really informal conversation with myself or one of my colleagues, where we'll learn more about what you're doing and help kind of figure out whether or not you're likely to be a good fit. Because ultimately, we're trying to make sure that people who are submitting applications to MTI have a chance of being approved. We don't want you to put in all the work of drafting an application only to find out that you are not a fit at all. But if we think you might be a fit, we'll encourage you to apply, and then you'll find out. But I would say submit an interest form and then get set up to talk to somebody at MTI.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Sure.
It looked like Nick had another question as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So like I guess can the grant money be used, like say if I'm in the point of my business where I'm just having trouble reaching customers, can that, say if I applied for money, can that just strictly be used just like all advertisement? Or like
Good
does it
question.
have to be like broken up into, all right, I'm going to use this for this, I'm going to order this much material with this,
Yeah, it has to be somewhat broken. Well, okay. So the best sort of MTI project, the language we use is you need to put forth a project proposal that's going to help move your innovation and business forward. So if you're at the stage where the most important investment is to invest in marketing or sales or advertising, that potentially could be a fit to MTI. It's not the strongest case. I would say the best thing for us is like research and development, but we certainly have funded sales and marketing efforts. I would say that you'll need to make sure you're fit for everything else, and you'll need to make a case as to how these funds will really move the needle for you. But if you're like, we're so ready to scale, we really just need to invest in advertising, that definitely could potentially be a fit.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, Steve
Yeah, go
Aaron
ahead.
again. Sorry.
Yeah.
You brought up R&D again. What TRL levels are you looking to push? Are you looking to take, basic research and then move it up, or are you looking to get research into production? It would just help me put together a project. If you could kind of define the types of R&D you're looking at or feel comfortable with.
I would say both. Our ultimate goal is for commercialization and businesses to scale. But we definitely, especially take biotech, for example, we've worked with companies who are really early stage, who have a lot of steps they need to get to commercialization. And we've supported them very early in their R&D project because they have a strong team and they're able to, show that they're addressing a real problem in the market. And we know that the project we're supporting them on is not going to get them immediately to commercialization, but we have enough belief in the overall venture and business that we're willing to support them at a very early stage. And then we also support projects where they're very close to commercializing. And for anybody who's not aware of that word commercialization, that means getting to sales. So, we've worked with companies who are relatively far from getting to sales, and then we work with companies who are very close to getting to sales. So it's really dependent on the innovation and kind of what needs to be done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So it kind of explains it that you're not limited to like moving a TRL level from demonstrated product to production or that type of thing. You're looking to say you got a good project and it has a good potential and you got a good team and it should move up the ladder.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Right. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
precisely.
thanks.
All right. Do we have any final questions? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you do happen to have any other questions, if that's okay with Tom, I'll include his email in the follow-up email. And you can reach out directly to him to get any final questions answered. I will also send along the slide deck as well. And I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Tom and the Maine Technology Institute, not only for presenting today, but also for their support of SCORE. And of course, if you would like to talk about your business with someone, you can get a free SCORE mentor at score.org and work with someone who's had years of experience in the industry and is just looking to give their time back to the community. So thank you everyone today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.